Welcome to a continuation of the futuristic fantasy series, Humanity's Evolution. Today I'm going to read Part 11. I didn't argue further with him. Instead, I watched as the surrounding little dragons started to disperse. My friend Sandra headed in my direction. "Anne," she said and hugged me. She then turned to Gershom and introduced herself as she shook his hand. "I guess Anne really did lay the groundwork for your recommendation," he said. My eyes grew wide as I turned to face him. He gave me an innocent look. Sandra gave him an understanding grin. "She did, but I thought you brought up some valuable points as well during your earlier debate. Having two people with such diverse points of view working on a social code for the new inhabitants will give them the best possible start." A serious look came into her eyes. "How many little dragons will be involved with this committee?" I glanced at Gershom. Neither one of us had discussed any of the pertinent details needed for this endeavor. It also felt it was a little premature to do too much planning. There was no guarantee that the planet project would be approved. But before I could say anything, Gershom answered her. "That hasn't been decided yet. Are you interested?" he asked. Sandra nodded her head. "The next speaker, Dave, is also interested," she admitted. "I know Dave," Gershom said. "He presents a very unique view of the Donna family, especially of the matriarch." Dave's historical expertise centered on how the infamous Donna family nearly launched the destruction of our world. The first age of enlightenment ended with the disappearance of many social problems, as our similarities for the first time truly outweighed our differences. Then another stage of development for our race began as the ability to manipulate energy started to manifest itself in future generations. It was a gradual change, with each new child becoming more adept at the process. The social code created at the end of the first age of enlightenment was adopted by most of this generation. A few, however, refused to embrace it. Their actions had consequences that none of the offenders had anticipated. An energetic creature emerged with the ability to wipe everything out of existence, including its creators. The little dragons managed to overcome the threat, but it gave one of the worst offenders, Candace Donna, head of the Donna family, an unflattering but permanent place in history. "Dave definitely provides a more sympathetic point of view of Candace Donna's actions," Sandra said, a hint of a smile on her face. Gershom shook his head. "Sympathy has nothing to do with it. The little dragons of old, who express shock at her actions, conveniently forget that a mere 300 years earlier, her worldview was shared by the majority of us. If more little dragons studied the pre-enlightened years in depth, they would understand that Candace's motivations existed even longer than the little dragon civilization." "I take it you are interested in having him on the committee?" Sandra queried. Gershom then looked at me. "What do you think?" he asked me. I shook my head, annoyed with both of them. "There hasn't been a vote yet. How can we start assembling a committee without firm approval?" I protested. Gershom gave me a strange look. "The vote is more likely to go in our favor if Ezekiel and the others know we already have committee members in mind." I shook my head in disapproval, glancing in both his and her direction. "I'm not comfortable planning this any further until we have a definitive vote." Gershom gave a heavy sigh. "Do you want the planet project to succeed?" he asked, his voice taking on a hard edge. He had made his feelings very clear on the topic, and he had assumed wrongly that they were my own. "I neither want it to succeed or fail. I'm quite content to do whatever the population votes to do. This is a very serious step for the little dragon race, and even with the social code in place, it could be a disaster. If we all agree to go ahead with it, then I will wholeheartedly support the project, but not until then." Gershom and Sandra exchanged glances. It was Sandra who finally addressed me. "Then we will have to wait and see what is decided. I'm hopeful it will be approved." She then left us, presumably to find a spot to listen to Dave's lecture. I watched her leave. You are scared to death of this project, aren't you?" Gershom asked when we were alone. I turned to him. "No, I'm not. I just want to make sure it is truly the right step forward for our people." My answer didn't satisfy him. "Evolution is a necessary way of life. We must change or we cease to exist. I fear that if we become too hesitant and fearful of this new opportunity, we will become a lesser species. A part of what makes us little dragons will be lost forever." "I fear the same thing, Gershom, if we don't allow every little dragon to vote on this with an open-minded heart," I replied. That ends Part 11 of Humanity's Evolution. Next week is Part 12. Also in February, a new video series called Storytime Adventures for Adults will be delving into Meg Swanson's fantasy book, Songs from the Depths. To learn more, visit my website, www.reneeannhughes.com. If you would like to contribute to this series, please feel free to become a Patreon. Details for joining are on my website, and also please subscribe to this YouTube channel so you won't miss any new videos. Goodbye, and thanks for listening.